My name is Serafina, and I am 28 years old. 3 months ago, I discovered that my entire family had been lying to me for decades, and what I did about it changed everything forever. When my sister Claudette sneered those words at me during our grandmother's funeral, she had no idea she was about to trigger the most calculated revenge in our family's history. The woman she dismissed as worthless would soon hold the power to destroy everything they had built on lies and stolen dreams. But before we dive into how I dismantled their perfect facade piece by piece, I need to know where you are watching this from. Drop your location in the comments below, smash that like button if you are ready for some serious family drama, and hit subscribe, because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Trust me, you will want to see how this revenge unfolds. The funeral was supposed to be a time for grieving, but instead it became the moment my world imploded. Grandmother Eleanor had always been my sanctuary, the one person who treated me like I truly belonged in our family. While my parents showered attention on Claudette, and my brother Marcus, Grandma Eleanor, made sure I felt loved and valued. She was the reason I stayed connected to a family that often made me feel like an outsider. Standing beside her casket, I watched my siblings act like the perfect grieving grandchildren they never actually were. Claudette wore designer black from head to toe, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Marcus stood stoically, checking his phone every few minutes like he had somewhere more important to be. Meanwhile, I genuinely mourned the loss of the only family member who had ever truly seen me. The reading of the will took place immediately after the service. Our family attorney, Mr. Hendricks, gathered us in the formal dining room of Grandma Eleanor's Victorian mansion. The room felt heavy with anticipation and barely concealed greed. My parents sat rigidly, my father adjusting his tie repeatedly while my mother smoothed her skirt with nervous hands. Claudette lounged in her chair like she owned the place, which frankly she probably expected to after today. Mr. Hendricks cleared his throat and began reading. Most of the inheritance went exactly where everyone expected. Claudette received Grandma's jewelry collection worth easily 6 figures. Marcus got the family business stocks and investment portfolio. My parents inherited the vacation home in Martha's Vineyard and various other properties. I sat quietly, expecting maybe a few $1,000s or perhaps some sentimental keepsakes, but then Mr. Hendricks said something that made everyone freeze. To Serafina, my beloved granddaughter who has shown me more genuine love than the rest of my family combined, I leave the entirety of my estate, including this house, my art collection, and my personal financial accounts totaling approximately $2.7 million. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at Mr. Hendricks, certain I had misheard him. $2.7 million. The house, everything. My family's faces went through a spectrum of emotions, from shock to confusion to barely controlled rage. Claudette was the first to explode. She shot to her feet so violently that her chair toppled backward. "This is absolutely insane," she screamed, her perfectly composed facade cracking like cheap paint. "There has to be some mistake. Serafina barely even visited Grandma. She does not deserve any of this." My father stood up, his face flushed red with anger. "We need to contest this will immediately. Something is not right here." Mother was clearly not in her right mind when she made these changes. But Mr. Hendricks held up his hand. "I assure you, Mrs. Eleanor was completely lucid when she updated her will 6 months ago. She also left specific instructions that I should provide additional context if anyone questioned her decision." He pulled out a sealed envelope and carefully opened it. Eleanor wrote, and I quote, "My dear family, if you are hearing this addendum, it means someone has questioned my decision to leave my estate to Serafina. Let me be crystal clear about why she deserves everything while the rest of you deserve nothing. Serafina was the only one who visited me regularly, who called me just to check how I was feeling, who remembered my birthday without being prompted by your mother. More importantly, she was the only one who never asked me for money or hinted about inheritance. The rest of you have spent years treating her like she does not belong, and frankly, after what I discovered about how this family has treated her, you are lucky I am leaving you anything at all." The room erupted into chaos. My mother burst into tears, wailing about how unfair this was to her other children. Marcus started pacing, muttering about legal challenges and family loyalty. But it was Claudette who delivered the blow that would change everything between us forever. She turned to me with pure venom in her eyes and said, "You manipulated a sick old woman into giving you money you have absolutely no right to. You were never really family anyway. We all know Dad is not your biological father. You are nothing but a bastard who wormed her way into our inheritance." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had always wondered why I looked so different from my siblings, why family photos always seemed slightly off with me in them, but hearing it said out loud with such cruelty and in front of everyone shattered something deep inside me. "Claudette, that is enough," my mother said sharply, but the damage was done. "No, it is not enough," Claudette continued, her voice rising to a shriek. "She does not deserve a single penny of Grandma's money. She is not even a real part of this family. You are not family anymore, Serafina. You never really were." I left that house in a daze, my mind reeling from everything that had just happened. $2.7 million. The truth about my parentage. The venomous hatred in Claudette's voice. As I drove home to my tiny apartment, I felt like I was seeing my entire life through new eyes. That night I sat on my couch with a bottle of wine and really thought about my family for the first time in years. All those times I felt like an outsider suddenly made perfect sense. The way conversations would stop when I entered a room, how family vacations always seemed planned around my schedule conflicts, the way my parents would beam with pride at Claudette's achievements but greet mine with polite indifference. But instead of wallowing in self-pity, something cold and calculating settled over me. If they wanted to treat me like I was not family, then I would show them exactly what that meant. If Claudette thought she could humiliate me and steal what Grandma Eleanor had rightfully left me, she was about to learn a very painful lesson about underestimating people. The next morning I called Mr. Hendricks to schedule a private meeting. His office was everything you would expect from a high-end estate attorney: leather-bound books, mahogany furniture, and the faint smell of expensive cigars. He greeted me with genuine warmth, which was refreshing after the hostility I had faced from my family. "I assume you are here about your family's reaction to the will," he said, settling behind his imposing desk. "Actually, I am here because I want to understand something my sister said. She claimed my father is not my biological father." "Is there any truth to that?" Mr. Hendricks looked uncomfortable. "Your grandmother mentioned that there might be some family secrets that could come to light after her passing. She left me another sealed letter with instructions to give it to you only if you specifically asked about your parentage." He handed me an envelope marked with my name and Grandma Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter that would change everything I thought I knew about my life. "My dearest Serafina," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means the truth has finally come out about your father. I have kept this secret for 28 years, but I always planned to tell you when the time was right. Your mother had an affair with a man named Jonathan Blackwell during a rough patch in her marriage to Robert. You are Jonathan's daughter, not Robert's, though Robert chose to raise you as his own despite knowing the truth." The letter went on to explain that Jonathan Blackwell was not just any man. He was a successful businessman who had built a technology company from the ground up. More importantly, he had no idea I existed. Grandma Eleanor had decided that keeping the secret was better for everyone involved, but she also knew that someday I might want to know the truth about where I came from. She had included Jonathan's contact information and even mentioned that she had kept in touch with him over the years, updating him about my life and accomplishments, without ever revealing that he was my father. According to her letter, he had often expressed admiration for the young woman she described, and had even said he wished his own children had turned out half as well. The final paragraph of the letter was what sealed my decision to pursue the nuclear option. "Serafina, you have every right to claim your true heritage. Jonathan has built an empire worth over $50 million, and you are his only child who has inherited his integrity and drive. His other children are spoiled and entitled, much like the family you grew up with. You deserve better than both families have given you, and I hope you will have the courage to claim what is rightfully yours." Sitting in Mr. Hendricks' office, holding proof that my entire identity had been built on lies, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and confusion transformed into cold, focused determination. My family wanted to disown me. Perfect. I would show them what it meant to lose a family member who actually mattered. I asked Mr. Hendricks to help me contact Jonathan Blackwell. He made some calls, and within 2 hours I had an appointment to meet my biological father the following week. In the meantime, I began researching everything I could about him and his family. Jonathan Blackwell was 55 years old and the CEO of Blackwell Technologies, a company that specialized in cybersecurity software. He had been married to the same woman for 30 years and had 2 children, a 26-year-old son named Trevor, who was clearly being groomed to take over the company despite having no apparent qualifications, and a 24-year-old daughter named Brianna who spent most of her time posting lifestyle content on social media, using her father's money. The more I learned about the Blackwell family, the more I realized that Grandma Eleanor had been right. His legitimate children were spoiled brats who had never worked for anything in their lives. Trevor had been handed a vice president position at 24 despite his only qualification being his last name. Brianna had been gifted multiple businesses that had all failed because she treated them like expensive hobbies rather than serious ventures. Meanwhile, I had put myself through college working 2 jobs to pay for my degree in business administration. I had spent 5 years climbing the corporate ladder at a marketing firm, earning every promotion through competence and dedication. I understood the value of hard work in a way that my supposed siblings clearly did not. As I prepared for my meeting with Jonathan, I also began planning my revenge against the family that had rejected me. They thought they could humiliate me at Grandma's funeral and walk away unscathed. They were about to learn that the quiet, overlooked daughter they had dismissed was actually their worst nightmare. The plan forming in my mind was beautiful in its simplicity. I would claim my birthright with the Blackwell family, while simultaneously destroying everything my adopted family held dear. They wanted me out of their lives. I would make sure they regretted that decision for the rest of their miserable existence. The meeting with Jonathan Blackwell took place at an upscale restaurant downtown. I arrived 15 minutes early, nervous but determined. When he walked in, I immediately understood why my mother had been attracted to him. Even in his 50s, Jonathan was distinguished and charismatic, with kind eyes that seemed to light up when they met mine. "Serafina," he said, softly approaching my table, "you look exactly like your mother did when she was your age." We talked for 3 hours. Jonathan explained that he had always suspected I might be his daughter, but he had respected my mother's decision to stay with her husband and raise me in what she believed was a stable family environment. He had followed my life from a distance through Grandma Eleanor's updates, and he was genuinely proud of everything I had accomplished. "I have to be honest with you," he said toward the end of our meal. "I have always wondered what it would have been like to have a child who actually appreciated the value of hard work. Trevor and Brianna are good kids in their hearts, but they have never had to struggle for anything. They do not understand what it means to build something from nothing." When I told him about what had happened at the funeral and how my family had treated me, his expression darkened. "That is absolutely unacceptable. No one should speak to you that way, family or not." I saw my opening and took it. "I have been thinking about that a lot lately. Maybe it is time I stopped trying to belong somewhere I was never really wanted." Jonathan nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I have been looking for someone to help me transition the company leadership. Trevor has the passion but lacks the experience and judgment. Brianna has great ideas but no follow-through. I could use someone with your background and work ethic." By the time we parted ways, I had a job offer as Director of Strategic Development at Blackwell Technologies, with a salary that was triple what I was making at my current position. More importantly, I had gained an ally who was genuinely interested in getting to know his daughter and who had the resources to help me execute my revenge. Over the next few weeks, I began working for Jonathan while maintaining my cover at my old job. I told my adopted family that I was taking some time to process everything that had happened and that I needed space to figure out my next steps. They were more than happy to give me that space, assuming I was sulking about the will situation. What they did not know was that I was using this time to gather intelligence about their finances and business dealings. Marcus worked as a financial advisor, and I had always known he was not particularly ethical about his client relationships. Claudette ran a high-end boutique that I suspected was not as profitable as she pretended. My parents had always lived beyond their means, constantly refinancing their house and taking out loans against future inheritance expectations. I hired a private investigator to dig deeper into their activities. What he found exceeded my wildest expectations. Marcus had been embezzling money from his clients' accounts to fund his gambling addiction. Claudette's boutique was operating as a money laundering front for her boyfriend's drug dealing operation. My parents had been committing tax fraud for years, hiding income from various rental properties they owned. The beautiful thing about having a family full of criminals is that they assume everyone else is just as corrupt as they are. They had never bothered to hide their activities from me, because they never thought I was smart enough or motivated enough to do anything with the information. But now, I had documentation of everything: bank records, email communications, photographs of suspicious activities. I had enough evidence to send all of them to prison if I wanted to. The question was how to use this information most effectively. I also began building relationships within my new family. Jonathan introduced me to Trevor and Brianna as a new employee without initially revealing our biological connection. I wanted to see how they treated someone they perceived as an outsider before they knew who I really was. Trevor was exactly what I had expected: entitled, lazy, and completely unaware of how incompetent he was. During our first meeting, he spent 20 minutes explaining basic business concepts to me that I had mastered years ago, clearly assuming that anyone not born into wealth must be intellectually inferior. Brianna was more interesting. She was definitely spoiled and had never faced real consequences for her failures, but she was not deliberately cruel like Claudette. She seemed genuinely curious about my background and asked thoughtful questions about my experience in marketing. When Jonathan finally revealed that I was his daughter, their reactions were telling. Trevor immediately became hostile and defensive, clearly viewing me as a threat to his inheritance and position in the company. Brianna was more welcoming but also obviously calculating how my presence might affect her own financial security. However, there was one person in the Blackwell family who embraced me completely: Jonathan's wife, Patricia. She had always wanted a daughter who shared her love of reading and intellectual conversations. Brianna was more interested in fashion and social media than the literature and philosophy discussions that Patricia craved. "I have waited 28 years to have a daughter like you," Patricia told me during one of our long talks. "Jonathan has told me so much about you over the years. I always hoped we would get the chance to meet someday." Patricia became my strongest advocate within the Blackwell family. She understood immediately that I was nothing like Trevor and Brianna, and she began pushing Jonathan to consider me as a serious successor rather than just another employee. Meanwhile, my adopted family had no idea what I was building. They assumed I was off somewhere licking my wounds, and eventually I would come crawling back, apologizing for causing drama and begging to be included in family events again. Claudette even sent me a few condescending text messages about how I needed to return Grandma's inheritance to the people who deserved it. What none of them realized was that I was no longer the powerless, overlooked daughter they had spent years dismissing. I now had resources, connections, and most importantly, information that could destroy every single one of them. The only question remaining was when and how to deploy my nuclear option for maximum impact. 6 months into my new life with the Blackwell family, I had established myself as Jonathan's most trusted advisor and Patricia's beloved daughter figure. Trevor's resentment had grown into open hostility, but his attempts to undermine me only highlighted his own incompetence. Brianna had warmed up to having a sister, especially after I helped her launch a legitimate business venture that was actually profitable for the first time in her life. More importantly, I had used my position at Blackwell Technologies to build an extensive network of contacts in law enforcement, financial regulation, and business journalism. When you work in cybersecurity, you develop relationships with people whose job it is to investigate financial crimes. I had been very careful to cultivate these relationships without revealing my ultimate intentions. The trigger for my revenge came when Claudette made a critical mistake. She had been pressuring me through increasingly nasty text messages and voicemails to renounce my inheritance. When those tactics failed, she decided to escalate by contacting my employer at my old job and telling them that I was mentally unstable and had threatened violence against my family. Her lies cost me my original position and could have destroyed my professional reputation if I had not already transitioned to working with Jonathan. But her attack on my career was the final straw. It was time to show my former family exactly what happened when you underestimated someone who had spent months preparing for war. I started with Marcus because his crimes were the most straightforward. and would create the biggest immediate impact. I had documentation showing that he had stolen over $400,000 from his clients over the past 3 years. The evidence was so comprehensive that even the most incompetent prosecutor could secure a conviction. I arranged to meet with Detective Sarah Morrison, whom I had worked with on several cybersecurity cases through Blackwell Technologies. I presented her with a complete dossier of Marcus's embezzlement activities, including bank records, forged documents, and a detailed timeline of his thefts. "This is incredibly thorough work," Detective Morrison said, reviewing the materials. "How did you come across this information?" "Marcus is my brother," I explained. "I discovered his activities accidentally and felt obligated to report them. I cannot stand by and watch him steal from innocent people who trusted him with their retirement savings." Detective Morrison nodded approvingly. "It takes courage to do the right thing when family is involved. We will begin investigating immediately." Within 48 hours, Marcus was arrested at his office in front of all his colleagues and clients. The news of his arrest spread quickly through the financial community, destroying what remained of his reputation and triggering a cascade of lawsuits from his victims. While Marcus was dealing with his legal troubles, I moved against Claudette. Her money laundering operation was more complex, but I had been documenting the flow of cash through her boutique for months. The evidence showed clearly that she was accepting large cash payments for merchandise that was never delivered, then depositing the money into accounts controlled by her boyfriend's organization. I provided this information to the DEA through an anonymous tip line, but I also sent copies of the evidence to several investigative journalists who specialized in exposing organized crime connections. The journalists were particularly interested when I pointed out that Claudette's boutique was located in an upscale shopping district where money laundering operations had been spreading like cancer. The raid on Claudette's boutique happened during the middle of a busy Saturday afternoon. Federal agents seized computers, financial records, and thousands of dollars in cash that she could not explain. The local news stations covered the story extensively, featuring footage of Claudette being led away in handcuffs while her wealthy customers watched in shock. But I saved the most devastating attack for my parents. Their tax fraud had been going on for years, and they had been incredibly sloppy about hiding their illegal activities. They owned several rental properties that they had never reported to the IRS, and they had been accepting cash payments from tenants while claiming the properties were vacant or operating at losses. The IRS takes tax fraud very seriously, especially when it involves substantial amounts of unreported income over multiple years. I provided them with detailed documentation of my parents' unreported rental income, including photographs of occupied properties that they had claimed were vacant, copies of cash deposit slips, and testimony from tenants who confirmed they had been paying rent in cash to avoid official documentation. The IRS investigation moved more slowly than the criminal cases against my siblings, but the results were equally devastating. My parents received notice that they owed over $200,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest. The financial strain forced them to sell their house and liquidate most of their assets just to avoid criminal prosecution. Throughout all of this, I maintained my cover perfectly. To my former family, I was still the defeated daughter who had disappeared after the will reading. They had no idea that their lives were being systematically destroyed by someone they had dismissed as weak and irrelevant. The beautiful irony was that their own crimes provided the ammunition for their destruction. I had not fabricated evidence or manipulated innocent people into wrongdoing. I had simply documented their existing illegal activities and ensured that the appropriate authorities became aware of them. When Marcus called me from jail begging for help with his legal fees, I listened to his desperate pleas with cold satisfaction. When Claudette sent me frantic messages claiming she was being framed by jealous competitors, I deleted them without responding. When my parents called crying about losing their house, I let the calls go to voicemail. They had made it clear that I was not family. Now they were learning what it meant to face their consequences without family support. The destruction of my former family happened faster than I had anticipated. Within 3 months of my first move against Marcus, all 4 of them were dealing with legal and financial catastrophes that would define the rest of their lives. Marcus pleaded guilty to embezzlement charges and received a sentence of 7 years in federal prison. His wife divorced him immediately, taking their 2 young children and moving across the country to live with her parents. She also sued him for the money he had stolen from their joint accounts to fund his gambling addiction, leaving him with absolutely nothing when he eventually got out of prison. Claudette's situation was even worse. Her boyfriend had fled the country when the DEA investigation began, leaving her to face money laundering charges alone. Her expensive lawyers managed to negotiate a plea deal that reduced her sentence to 4 years, but the federal conviction meant she would never be able to work in retail or financial services again. Her boutique was permanently closed, and she lost her luxury apartment when she could no longer afford the rent. My parents aged 10 years in the span of 6 months. The stress of the IRS investigation, combined with the shame of having 2 children in federal prison, destroyed their social standing in the community they had worked so hard to impress. They were forced to move into a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood, and my father had to take a part-time job at a hardware store just to pay their basic expenses. The most satisfying part was watching how quickly their friends and social circle abandoned them. These were people who had looked down on me for years, treating me like I was somehow inferior because I worked for my achievements instead of inheriting them. Now they crossed the street to avoid being seen talking to my disgraced parents. I followed the developments through news reports and social media, but I maintained complete distance from their suffering. A few well-meaning acquaintances tried to guilt me into helping my family during their crisis, but I had learned to shut down those conversations quickly. They made it very clear that I was not family, I would explain calmly. I am simply respecting their wishes. Meanwhile, my life with the Blackwell family was flourishing beyond my wildest dreams. Jonathan had promoted me to Chief Operating Officer, making me the second most powerful person in the company. Trevor had quit in a rage when he realized that I was being positioned as the heir apparent, but his departure only confirmed Jonathan's belief that I was the right choice to lead the company into the future. Brianna had embraced her role as my sister wholeheartedly. With my help, she had launched a successful online business, selling handcrafted jewelry, and she was finally experiencing the satisfaction of building something with her own talents and efforts. She often told people that having me as a sister had changed her perspective on what it meant to earn success rather than simply inherit it. Patricia had legally adopted me as her daughter even though I was 28 years old. She said she wanted to make sure that no one could ever question my place in the family again. The adoption ceremony was small and private, but it meant more to me than any of the expensive gifts or inheritance money I had received. The contrast between my two families could not have been starker. The people who had raised me were scattered and broken, facing years of legal consequences for their greed and corruption. The family that had claimed me was thriving, building something meaningful together based on mutual respect and genuine affection. But perhaps the most satisfying vindication came when I received a letter from Grandma Eleanor's attorney. Apparently, she had left one final surprise in her will that was only to be revealed after 1 year had passed. The letter explained that she had known about my biological father all along and had been secretly hoping that her death would force the truth to come out. She had also known about my adoptive family's criminal activities, having hired her own private investigator years earlier, when she began to suspect that they were not the upstanding people they pretended to be. Her decision to leave me her entire estate had been motivated not just by love but by her desire to give me the resources I would need to escape from a family that was ultimately toxic and destructive. The final paragraph of her letter brought tears to my eyes. "My dearest Serafina, you have always been stronger and more intelligent than the people who raised you, but you were too kind-hearted to see their true nature. I hope that my gift has given you the freedom to find where you truly belong. You deserve a family that appreciates your worth, and I believe you will build one that honors the best parts of who you are." Reading those words, I realized that everything had happened exactly as it was meant to. The pain and humiliation of that day at the funeral had been necessary to push me toward claiming my real identity and finding my genuine family. 2 years have passed since Claudette told me I was not family anymore, and I can honestly say that those words were the greatest gift she ever gave me. What she meant as an insult became the catalyst for the most transformative period of my life. Today I am the Chief Executive Officer of Blackwell Technologies, having taken over when Jonathan decided to retire early and focus on philanthropic work. The company has grown by 40% under my leadership, and we have expanded into new markets that Jonathan had never considered. More importantly, I have built a corporate culture based on merit and integrity rather than nepotism and entitlement. Trevor eventually came crawling back asking for a job after his trust fund ran out and he discovered that no other company wanted to hire someone with his reputation for incompetence. I offered him a position in our entry-level training program where he could learn the business from the ground up like any other employee. He lasted 3 weeks before quitting again, claiming the work was beneath his dignity. Brianna, on the other hand, has thrived in her role as Director of Creative Development. Her business degree, combined with her natural eye for design and her newfound work ethic, has made her invaluable to our marketing initiatives. She often jokes that having a sister who demands excellence has made her a better person than she ever thought she could be. Patricia and I have developed the mother-daughter relationship I always dreamed of but never experienced growing up. We travel together, attend cultural events, and have long philosophical discussions about everything from literature to business ethics. She tells people that getting to raise me as an adult has been one of the greatest joys of her later life. As for my biological father, Jonathan has become the parent I always needed. He challenges me intellectually, supports my ambitions, and treats me as an equal partner in both business and family decisions. He recently told me that having me in his life has restored his faith in the next generation and given him hope that the company will continue to thrive long after he is gone. Meanwhile, my former family continues to deal with the consequences of their choices. Marcus was released from prison last month, but he is struggling to find work with his criminal record. Claudette still has 2 more years to serve, and she has been sending me letters asking for money to help with her legal appeals. I return them unopened. My parents have reached out several times, usually when they are facing some new financial crisis or health emergency. They seem genuinely confused about why I will not help them, as if they have completely forgotten how they treated me for 28 years. I have learned that some people are incapable of genuine remorse, only self-pity when their actions finally catch up with them. The most interesting development has been watching how the community has reacted to my success. Many of the same people who used to treat me like I was somehow inferior now go out of their way to congratulate me on my achievements. Some have even suggested that I should forgive my family and help them rebuild their lives. But forgiveness does not mean accepting abuse or enabling destructive behavior. My former family made their choices freely, knowing full well that their actions were wrong. They treated me terribly when they thought I was powerless, and they destroyed their own lives through greed and corruption. I am not responsible for fixing the mess they created. Instead, I have focused my energy on building something positive and meaningful. Patricia and I have established a scholarship fund for young women from dysfunctional families who demonstrate academic excellence and leadership potential. Jonathan and I have created a mentorship program that connects successful business professionals with young people who are trying to build careers without family support. These initiatives have allowed me to turn my painful experiences into something that helps other people avoid or overcome similar situations. Every scholarship recipient and mentorship success story feels like a small victory against the kind of toxicity that once defined my life. I have also learned that family is not determined by blood or legal relationships. The people who love you, support your growth, and celebrate your successes are your real family, regardless of how you met them or what biological connections you share. The Blackwells have shown me what healthy family dynamics actually look like, and I am grateful every day that I had the courage to walk away from people who never deserved my loyalty. So, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to walk away from family members who were toxic or destructive? How did you find the strength to put your own well-being first? Share your stories in the comments below, because I know many of you have faced similar situations where blood relatives turned out to be the wrong people to trust. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better than the family they were born into. Sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is having the courage to find where you truly belong. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that justice might take time, but it always finds its way to the people who deserve it. Keep fighting for your dreams, keep building relationships with people who appreciate your worth, and never let anyone convince you that you should settle for less than you deserve. The best revenge truly is living well, and I am living proof that sometimes the family you choose is infinitely better than the one you were born into.